Welcome to the summary of Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. Let's uncover the gems together. Key point 1. Do we ever stop being strangers? We think we can read a stranger in front of us like an open book. Unaware, strangers are the most natural and fitting for decoding. But in reality, the person behind us thinks they can read us the same way. How dare they think we're that easy? Some things must stay unsaid for us to keep personal space. Do you see the inconsistency? Getting to know someone takes years, but full disclosure is not guaranteed even then. Prejudice is a collective curse that twists our connections instead of enriching them. Malcolm Gladwell studied this conflict to explain our bias and its perils. Prejudice and incompetence go a long way toward explaining social dysfunction in the United States. Malcolm Gladwell. In the next few minutes, we will explore the fundamental mistakes we make when addressing a stranger. Some have acquired theoretical support, but real-life stories will ease your comprehension. Without further ado, let's dive into a sea of complete strangers. Key point 2. The charms of a tyrant. The clouds over Europe were getting dark in the late 1930s as Adolf Hitler threatened to occupy the Sudetenland, a part of then Czechoslovakia. The German dictator covered the whole continent in goosebumps. However, it didn't stop British PM Neville Chamberlain or Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax from meeting him in person. Both were pleasantly surprised by Hitler and his friendly gestures. At least, they considered them such. They left believing his promise not to invade Czechoslovakia. In less than 6 months, the Führer did precisely the opposite and started World War II. So, what happened? Were the seasoned politicians naive? Yes and no. A few years ago, a study led by American psychologist Emily Pronin proved that people assume they know others better than others know them. The participants had to fill in blanks, forming different words like touch or tough, treat or defeat, and so on. They believed the words they came up with had nothing to leak about their personality. Yet, they eagerly built assumptions about each other based on others' words. No one had an aha moment. They had fallen into an illusion of asymmetric insight. Thinking we know others better than they know us implies that we hold an insight they don't realize about themselves. This way, we risk losing attention when we ought to listen and not talk. A person will open up if you offer an ear to listen. Neville Chamberlain never doubted the brilliance of his attempt to prevent war. He paid his price for being inattentive, and his negotiations with Hitler were named one of the most futile in history. Listening still has little recognition as a fundamental conversation tool. Next time you want to get to know someone, ask yourself, what do I gain by imagining them not as they are? Remember, eventually, everyone shows their colors, so you don't have to do it for them. We jump at the chance to judge strangers. We would never do that to ourselves, of course. Malcolm Gladwell. Key point 3. There's no trustworthy without trust. Ana Montes was one of the most respected and trusted agents at the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. At that time, Cuba under Fidel Castro was one of the DIA's hot regions, so when one too many coincidences happened in a span of days, the alarm bells started to ring. But what struck military counterintelligence analyst Reg Brown was a suspicious connection to Ana Montes, who just happened to have worked on her research program in Cuba. The agent did not slip up during interrogation. Her alibi had no loose ends. The incident was dismissed until 5 years later when the agency learned that Montes had been sending classified information to Cuba. Every night after work, she put her incredible memory to work, sending vital pieces of intelligence to the Cuban government. She had been their spy since the day she entered the DIA. But how did Ana Montes wrap the whole agency around her finger? Why couldn't world-class agents expose her? The key might be hidden in the truth default theory, TDT. Sometimes, Even the most familiar and worn-out cover can reveal new secrets if you know how to read it. Now, how about this? TDT says our automatic guess about others is that they are honest with us. A study by University of Alabama at Birmingham Communication Studies, Professor Timothy R. Levine found that people could distinguish a truth teller better than a lie. The professor called this the default to truth, hence the theory's name. Ana Montes's colleagues made a grave yet natural mistake. They assumed she was telling the truth, thus overlooking the critical evidence. The former spy-turned-DIA analyst had criticized the government's policy in Central America, which Cuba used to recruit her. Ana Montes was prosecuted and sentenced to 25 years in prison for spying for the Cuban government. She was released on January 6, 2023, and remains under supervision. So, what does this story teach us? A default amount of trust for a new person is natural and healthy, but Ana Montes' case proves that internal debriefing and critical thinking are crucial when a situation calls for it. Key point 4. People are strange when you're a stranger. In 2007, exchange student Meredith Kircher was murdered by Rudy Guide in Perugia, Italy. All the evidence pointed to him, but it was her roommate Amanda Knox who attracted the most media attention. Her reaction to the murder was suspicious, costing her 4 years of freedom before being back in the clear. What was it that led the investigation in the wrong direction? Amanda was calm and not sad about the murder of her roommate. And now, it's time to learn about the mismatch and the illusion of transparency. Let's return to Tim Levine's study. There, each participant played a quiz, paired with an instructor and a predetermined lab member they did not know. The partners had to trick the participants into cheating when the instructor left the room, and later, Tim checked them for lies. One woman defied expectations. She told the truth, even though she was nervous and fidgety. The moral of the story: you can't always tell the truth or the lie from a person's face. If this study had existed during Meredith Kircher's case, maybe Amanda Knox wouldn't have been arrested. In fact, even Ana Montes would have been caught earlier. In her later memoirs, Knox described herself as a weird kid who played a dangerous game and acted in a way people interpreted as suspicious in the given context. Her behavior mismatched the truth, but Amanda Knox was not the only one with unusual reactions. Ana Montes's calm response to accusations should have alarmed the DIA administration. She seemed undisturbed on the surface, but was panicking inside. Confidence does not always reveal a truth teller, just like nervousness doesn't always expose a liar. Another study by German psychologists Achim Schutzvoll and Rainer Reisenstein showed that facial expressions were milder compared to emotions experienced. For example, some participants did not open their eyes wide or scream when startled. They seemed visually calm. We have become used to seeing exaggerated emotions on screen, but people rarely react similarly in real life. Clarity in communication is challenging because behavior and words do not always match, creating an illusion of transparency. We cannot rely on words alone without seeing the person because the truth always hides in the cracks between the two. Key point 5. The stranger part is never really over. In March 2003, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, captured one of the most dangerous al-Qaeda officials, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM, whose interrogation went down in CIA's history. KSM admitted to the murder of Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl. He said he had addressed Pearl by name as if they were friends and then executed him. This incident sent chills down the spine of James Mitchell, a professional psychologist and interrogator. He and his colleague, Bruce Jensen, worked on the Enhanced Interrogation Techniques, EITs under the SEER, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape, program for the CIA employees if taken hostage. Sleep deprivation, walling, and waterboarding were considered the most effective in the SEER, but even their cumulative effect had to pile up to exhaust KSM's will. In the end, he did confess to being involved in multiple operations in the name of jihad. This result may seem like a win for American intelligence, but not for Charles Morgan, a professional psychiatrist whose research on post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, challenged the value of all the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques. The question Morgan asked himself before the research was, why do some veterans suffer from PTSD, while others are largely unaffected by highly stressful events? To find an answer, he went to study the soldiers in the SEER school and left surprised, to say the least. At school, he noticed the disciplined and organized soldiers react to the replica of a prisoner of war camp as if it were real. Their prefrontal cortex, the buoy of rationality, defaulted to their prepubescent level. It is what happened to the man responsible for the 9/11's attack. KSM was so sleep-deprived that he would have confessed to anything, even things he didn't do. Thus, another question is waiting to be answered. Has this interrogation really achieved anything? One thing is certain, we may not know everything about the person in front of us, even if they are not a stranger. The second sure thing is that we can jeopardize a relationship if we try to pressure them into sharing. You can't force openness by pushing someone out of their boundaries. Did you know? According to Mitchell's SEER research, women have a more resilient and cold-minded response to threats to hurt their colleagues than men. The researcher himself faced a torture simulator after his female partner refused to sell out. Key point 6. In the minds of hopeless. Disclaimer: mentions of suicide. Sylvia Plath was 30 years old when she took her own life due to clinical depression. Her choice of death, carbon monoxide poisoning, was indeed a choice, not an erratic decision. The battle with her demons witnessed multiple attempts, but she prepared the last one so carefully that there was no doubt in her determination. But why did Sylvia Plath choose what she chose, and what can her tragic death teach us about strangers? Malcolm Gladwell offers two theories for the taking. Displacement assumes people are determined to find other ways to do something self-harming if they are devoid of initial means. Coupling combines specific conditions and behaviors for a risky act to happen. These two concepts are opposite if we think about it. Most people believe in displacement, or the idea that suicidal people will work out another way to end their lives, so securing popular spots for taking someone's own life is useless. On the other hand, research done by psychologist Richard Seiden found that some behaviors are coupled with a particular context. For example, the Golden Gate Bridge is infamously known among people with suicidal tendencies. The coupling theory suggested that securing the bridge with a net could avert people from attempting to take their own lives. In their minds, this very decision was linked to this specific place, meaning they wouldn't repeat their attempt elsewhere or in another way. Sylvia Plath's death is a sad example. She tried to take her life in multiple different ways before she found the one of which she was least afraid. She could have been alive and cared for if Great Britain had converted to natural, less toxic gas more quickly, but we can only guess it now. Except that hope fluctuates. It's normal for it to ebb and flow. What does this story teach us about strangers? First, we're still firmly attached to the default to truth and the illusion of transparency. Second, we rarely consider whether a new person's behavior can be linked to a particular environment or place. We think in displacement terms as if people's ways of acting don't fluctuate. When we register this coupling, it becomes easier to see this new person as more complex and deeper, and thus be more compassionate. Conclusion: all people, those we have just met and those we have known for years, hold secrets. Although it is human nature to have a little headspace for things that are for only us to know, we must remind ourselves of this every time our brain itches to stereotype someone. We know now that humans can be naive at their peril, but society would turn paranoid if we were suspicious of everything and everyone. It seems like lacking experience is not that bad after all, so let's not beat ourselves up when someone is not the way we expected them to be. Our hearts are made to trust, but how can they learn without practice? Try this. Travel is a fantastic way to open your mind and become less prejudiced, so book that flight somewhere you have craved to go and challenge your worldview. If you're worried that your unconscious bias may spoil your genuine concern for others, learn to release this fear. Genuineness is always felt, no matter the circumstances. That's all for now. More intriguing summaries are just a click away.